Thank you for tuning in to Koppen with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen. We're here with comic Barry Dougherty. Barry Dougherty, how the hell are you?
I am well. Thank you, sir.
Oh, good. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, you just been a fucking saint as you're sitting here during my Skype issues. All of a sudden, my mic just broke on one, and so I had to open up a whole second computer, and now it finally works. So through all this cursing, Barry Dougherty has been a perfect professional.
My ears have been burning with the words you were using.
Dude, it was pretty explicit, so hopefully I can kind of keep the curse words away. But Barry Dougherty, of course, is the famous dude, and you can find him on Twitter. He's Barry Laughs, Laffs. On Instagram, he's Barry M. Dougherty. This is all from recollection because he's such a badass, and I don't have my computer working. And then his website is BMD Communications, and you can see, like on this guy's Instagram, he's got him and Jerry Stiller. On his website, he's got him and he's got Samuel Jackson and Katie Couric, and I might have even spied Uma Thurman right there. But then if you look at his Twitter, he's written all these books, all of them by, Friars Club and Stand Up Roast and things like that. He was the head writer at the Friars Club roasts, I think, and he'll correct me on that. But several books, each of which just written by, the foreword has been written by just a luminary, like maybe, if my recollection serves me, Richard Pryor, Richard Lewis, Drew Carey.
Yep.
And I think I'm missing another huge one. I know Gilbert Gottfried also did a testimonial on your website. What the fuck, dude? Why are you so fucking famous? And thank you for gracing us with your presence.
You're very welcome. I'm having the best time ever so far.
This has been a great interview. You're doing great, Brian. I like how I like how you started. Let's keep it up.
All righty.
And so I guess, when I get somebody like this on the phone, I'm just going to pick your brain. It's so great that you came on because there's a lot of stand-ups on here. There's a lot of writers on here. And, the pandemic has hit, so people have to kind of adjust on the fly. Some people are hitting, Zoom mics and park mics and rooftop shows and things like that. Some people can't get the rooftop shows or the big Bel Air diner show, which is the big time show. And so some of these people might think, hey, man, let me go a different route. Let me go the writing route. Let me write a book like Barry Dougherty. Let me, write for others. Maybe I can get a writing gig. How the fuck does one go about doing that? Like, how did you get it? Is it just because you were hilarious?
Yes. That's the bottom line. End of discussion. Because I'm
the shortest episode ever, yeah.
Well, I've been a writer throughout. I've had a wacky career. I was a news reporter for Cablevision on Long Island for a while, and I went through all of these weird. I worked at now it's the Paley Center for Media, but throughout it all, I've always been writing. I would have pieces in the Times would show up or local newspapers. But it's when I got to the Friars Club that things took off for me in terms of writing humor. I was around all of these guys, and back then I was there for a while, so it was people that you don't remember, like Alan King, who wrote the foreword to one of the books. But it was being able to just listen to them and hear their rhythm and get their voice, and then I could put things on paper myself in terms of a few things, writing my own experiences, because I write essays about kind of my life, things that go on in it. And the greatest opportunity was to be able to write for these roasts, because the Friars at the time were the only ones actually doing it until we went on Comedy Central. And then it took off like wildfire all over the place. Everybody's doing it. Right. So the opportunity to write for these guys and hear what they want to talk about and just make it funny, it was a great opportunity. And then it turned into books. One of my favorite books is called How to Do It Standing Up, and it's how to be a stand-up comic, lest you think otherwise. And it's interviewing all different kind of comedians, all cross generations, and how they got started, their first time, their worst time. So that's the one that Richard Pryor wrote the foreword for, and it was just a great opportunity to just talk to these guys, hear their stories, and it's been a really great journey here.
And it sounds like you kind of learned a little bit about, timing and spacing and cadence and things like that from, I don't know, listening to them do it. But how'd you get that gig in the first place then? Like, how was it just kind of such a smaller organization that they're like, I know Barry, he's funny, and then you got the gig and you kind of grew on the job?
I wish that was it.
Barry's a funny guy. Let's get him to write for the Luminaries, right?
I have to, I keep trying to make up different stories that would be really fascinating. But I was working at the Paley Center. I keep calling it that, even though when I was there, it was the Museum of TV and Radio. And I was just dealing with the public, but that public, sometimes it would be like Tom Hanks came in one day. He wanted to watch some Bosom Buddies, and and we were crowded, so there was a wait, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm about to tell Tom Hanks, you have to come back in 3 hours and we'll put you on the list. And then I realized, no, I can't do that. So I said, oh, well, we're booked up. But because and his eyes widened as if, don't you dare say my name. So I turned it into because of who you are. I was able to get him in. So in dealing with even those people, it was exciting. And again, I wish that had something to do with, like, Tom Hanks got me into the Friars, but no. They ended up doing away with my position there. And I happen to know somebody who worked there, and they said, why don't you come on over? So I did. And I started writing their magazine. They had a magazine that they had put out for years, and the guy that did it, he died, which is very sad. But I got the gig.
And Barry killed him, of course.
I felt sad for a moment. So, and that opened up a lot. I was able to just write whatever I wanted, whether it was interviews with people like Rob Reiner and Jerry Stiller, or then my experiences. The first book I wrote for them was the Friars Club Book of Roasts, which is the history of their roast, how it began. And it's a filthy book because it's transcriptions of all these roasts and what they said at them. So I went out to LA and I interviewed all these people. So I was able to write an article about that experience in itself. So a lot came out of all of that. It was just great.
So it's just like, because you were doing the magazine and because you did the book of their historical roast, people found out this Barry guy is funny enough to become the head writer at some point.
Yes, we'll leave it at that. But
but there's many steps along the journey, I suppose.
Well, ultimately, I ended up becoming sort of their writer for many things, different correspondence even and whatnot, communications. Right. But being able to be the head writer of some of those roasts was pretty cool. And it was also working with it once we had the material, and I'll admit it's not like a one-man show there. I had put out the word for other writers to come help me, but it was also kind of work with these people. You mentioned Uma Thurman. She's an actress, but that doesn't mean she's a comedian who can get up and roast. Right. So once you give them material and that they look at and think, well, I'm not doing this. So you have to convince them. I had a whole bit about her having a foot fetish. Well, actually, it was Quentin Tarantino. It was his roast, him having a foot fetish. And she was just like, no, that is not going to happen. Well, she ended up taking it to the nth degree. During the show, she took off her shoes, her Louboutins, and she poured champagne in them, and then she handed him a shoe, and the two of them toasted.
Oh, that's magical. So did you write that, or did she riff a little bit on that?
Well, I wrote it, and then, as I said, she was appalled about it. Oh, you mean the shoe part?
The shoe part.
No, she took that ball and ran with it.
Wow. Because they're like, whatever gets laughs, that they understand now that the currency here is laughs, and so even if a foot fetish is what gets laughs, that's where Uma's going to go.
Exactly. Wow. I mean, that's what it's all about. And so if they can do a roast like that, then that means they got it. Here's someone who was very shy about doing it, and she even canceled appointments with me to meet. But when she finally the spotlight went on, and this happens with all of them, it takes a whole different turn, and they're great. I mean, they're hilarious.
That's great. They're natural performers, and if they're going for laughs, they're going to listen to Barry laughs. And I guess my question is, it sounds like since roasts weren't huge, this might have not, you didn't anticipate that this would grow to be so huge, where you're, roasting Quentin Tarantino and riffing through the mouth of Uma Thurman. And so I guess my question is, for some people who are trying to make hay out of a pandemic, like, what's the best way to start, in your opinion? Do you think that, are you just going to pitch, your writing packet to SNL every year, or do you think you should start something? Because currently I think I've had a couple hundred guests so far, and I think I'll be starting a daily monologue where I'll be soliciting monologue jokes from all the guests I've had. And then I'll make it clear that the jokes are theirs, of course, but it'll be kind of a way to amplify their voice. So in that regard, I'll be starting my own thing of like a daily monologue. Other people have a crew of people where they do kind of a web series, and they're some geniuses who've been on this fucking podcast are just getting together, and I just see their product. It's outstanding. If it gains traction, it'll be huge. And so, do you think that you should start your own thing, or try to get a credit at a bigger place and just kind of work your way through institutions? What do you think is the way to do it during, now that there's a pandemic and there's less kind of comedy opportunities available?
Well, the pandemic has changed everything, whether it's even for comedians themselves. I mean, everything's been shut down for any venue, whether it's a writer writing for somebody who performs and that person can't perform anymore. But it has morphed into something incredible. Social media obviously having a lot to do with it. I mean, you take a look at, I don't know, look at Sarah Cooper. Where was she? And I'm not negating her talent and her hard work prior to this, but let's face it, if it weren't for the pandemic, if it weren't for her trying to come up with new and inventive ways to get her comedy out there, and what she did with doing the Trump briefings, it was brilliant. And just by tweeting it and putting it on Instagram, it got her on Jimmy Kimmel. So I think that's a huge important way to go. Turn to social media. Tweet out funny lines. I'm reading Twitter all the time. There's some very funny people out there. They're not even in the business, but they're just so funny. I look at this person. I don't know what they do for a living. Maybe they sell shoes. And there's nothing wrong with selling shoes, by the way. But I think, why isn't this person, out there writing for Jimmy Kimmel or Tonight Show or whatever? So I think for someone who's interested right now in trying to start something up, do that. Get your own work out there. You can be a very funny writer. It doesn't mean you have to be a performer. Alan Zweibel, who wrote for Saturday Night Live, and he's written movies and books and whatnot. He's got a movie coming out, I think, with Billy Crystal. He started out, he auditioned to be a comedian. I mean, he was doing funny things or saying his funny words, but he wasn't good at it. And I mean, he'll admit it. But yet you have someone like, a Lorne Michaels, who's like, you're terrible stand-up, but you're really funny. So that's helps too. I mean, either recognize your limitations on where you want to be. You don't have to be the writer and the performer.
And how can you tell the difference? How can you say, I'm not good at stand-up, if you're not even getting the opportunity to kind of perform at a higher level? At what point do you say, do you just kind of like do everything and see what hits? I mean, if you love it and you want a career in comedy, you're just going to tweet all day, write all night, and perform all weekend.
Well, there's something to that. I mean, I think you can figure out pretty quickly, and it's not really your call, it's the audience's, that you're not a good comedian. you only need to get up at an open mic night a few times, and people pretty much shut you down. So that's when you can think, okay, well, maybe that's not for me. But a lot of those guys too, if they do that, you have the other comedians on the bill who might think, wow, you've got some really funny stuff. Let me take a crack at it, and with your material, and see how that flies. And then to notice that it can actually get some laughs, because let's face it, it's all about the delivery. So, you can have a hilarious line, and just somebody not good at it just messes it up. So,
right. And so, I mean, but like, at what point did you realize, I'm a genius at writing in general, and I'm a genius at writing for others. But I've also seen, your picture that we're using right now is you at the Grisly Pear. So you've done stand up, and so, do you use stand up as kind of a way to test certain things that you're thinking about writing down?
No, my stand up is actually more in terms of it's displaying my essays. I write humor essays. I'm very and I perform them. I have even a show, My Life in 5 Essays, by Barry Dougherty. Yeah. So knowing that my essays and my writing is very funny, I do have a funny delivery, I will admit. But, so that's in terms of my performance, that's where that comes from. But for me to get up and tell jokes, it's just, I don't know. To be honest, I've never actually tried it, except when I was in high school. There was the junior variety show, and I actually was pretty funny at that. But for the most part, I enjoy performing, don't get me wrong, but, either the essays or, back in the day, I attempted to try some acting. And that, again, you realize pretty quickly when casting agents don't ever call you back. So, but I get more from the writing aspect. I just, I mean, if I can make myself laugh, and I'll admit, I'm a tough audience, and comedians are tough audiences. Yeah. And the problem with that is when they get to a comedy show, the comedians will stand in the back while each one of them are up performing. And if it's a light house and you don't have the normal laughs coming from an audience, you're not necessarily going to get it from the comedians, because they stand in the back and all they do is sort of nod and say, oh yeah, that was a good one. Oh
yeah, no. I love the nodding comedian. Yeah. It's like, your nodding does not make any noise, you motherfucker. But also, it's like, they might be on their phones, and so it's like, how do you even figure out if something is worth it? You got to go to open mics that are a little bit more attentive. But I guess my final question kind of arises from the fact that you do the one-man show with your 5 essays or whatever. Like, I think there's a Judy Collins book at some point where she said that stories aren't funny, or something like that. Like, she discouraged the telling of stories. But recently there's been people like Birbiglia and Mulaney who have shown that stories can be so fucking funny, and that's probably the only thing I would want to tell on stage. So, the Judy Collins wisdom gave me a little bit of hesitation. So what's your take on that? It sounds like, I mean, essays are not necessarily stories, but how are stories different from essays, and can stories be funny? Especially, and can you throw Judy Collins under the bus?
Yeah, I will. She's dead wrong.
Is she also dead?
Can't sing a note. No. Wait, I don't know.
It's not Judy Collins is the humor writer, I think I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. Well, she's alive then. I don't need to kill anybody off here. Well, actually, storytelling is taking off again, or if it ever was, I don't know. I mean, in terms of monologues and comedians who used to tell these long and involved stories, and then that sort of went by the wayside. But the storytelling is back, and people are getting up and they are telling stories because people want to hear it. The audiences are funny, and people are very fickle, and we get very bored. So comedy has always evolved in different ways. You had the old time comic who, with the cigar and, hey, and, take my wife, please, just tell a joke, get the punchline and whatever. And then it morphed into sort of the Jerry Seinfeld, let me just talk about life. So people in the audience say, oh my God, that's so you, right. When they start relating it to themselves. So it keeps moving. And I think the new thing now is, engage me. now more and more people go to, say, Broadway shows. They look at plays. They get the story angle. They read their Kindles, whatever. Right. So now they're saying that, all right, I'm going to give you the time. Engage me. Tell me stories. I don't need to be laughing every 2 seconds, but I need to laugh maybe every 2 minutes. I don't know. So,
like now people want to they want to believe that the stand-up is telling something that's from their own life. Like back in the day, it was a little bit, incredible misdirection where I'm like, I don't believe that, and it doesn't fit with your other jokes, Nikki Glazer. Like, why are you telling me you just fucked a homeless guy because 5 seconds ago you were in a serious relationship? Like, so sometimes I don't get that, but when she gets personal about what she was growing up and she went through puberty and she learned that certain things she would have to do in the context of relationship, romantic relationship, she was horrified. And so like that stuff, like I believe it. And so Mulaney and Birbiglia can kind of do that. So you're saying that now, audiences are maybe getting a little bit hip to the whole stand-up punch zinger game, and they want to see who you are through your, jokes and even stories.
Right. I think, audiences are pliable enough to kind of run with whatever you throw at them, as long as it's good. As long as they're entertained and it's funny and you have a delivery about you. If you just stand up there, we can't all be Stephen Wright. So, you got to have some cadence there, but just make it fun.
And the person making it fun, of course, is Barry Laughs, a.k.a. Barry Dougherty, and he is Barry Laughs on Twitter, and he's also Barry M. Dougherty on Instagram, and his website, you could either do barrydougherty.com, which will then direct you to BMD Communications, and you can see his testimonials by Gilbert Gottfried and Richard Lewis, and see his pictures with such famous people as he's explaining things to people like Liza Minnelli. It's fucking classic. But Barry Dougherty, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.